All right, welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us. I'm Chad Koulis, Executive Director of the Midway Chamber of Commerce, and we're thrilled to be joined today by the Mayor of St. Paul, Mayor Melvin Carter. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to our board chair. We have new board chairs every July, and our board chair right now from Lodoff Brothers Auto Body is Jamison Randall. Jamison.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Jamison Randall, board chair of the Midway Chamber of Commerce, and on behalf of our board of directors, I am so thrilled to be hosting this meeting with our wonderful Mayor, Melvin Carter. We've got a great program here today. I'm so excited. It's a great turnout today, and it's great to see a lot of your smiling faces out there. So if you're hiding, you're just name showing, show us your face. We'd love to see you. It's great to have these meetings and really see those smiles out there. So if you're out there, let us see your face. It'd be really great. But yeah, the Midway Chamber, we're over 100 years, and we're really celebrating that. And our goal is to build a stronger Midway. We love working with our city officials. We love working with our nonprofit community, the residents of this wonderful city, and the business community that we represent. So I'd like to introduce at this time our sponsor of this event, Chris Ferguson. He has been a critical asset to our chamber. And Chris Ferguson, if you could please say words with Bywater Business Solutions. Thank you so much for your sponsorship. I'm going to hand it off to you at this time. Let's give him a big round of applause. Chris, thank you.
Thank you, James. Thank you, Jamison. So, I was one of the many past board chairs of the Midway Chamber, and it's just a phenomenal organization, and we continue to cherish our partnership with the chamber and look at opportunities to sponsor. And so Bywater is we do a couple different things. Primarily what we do is print, promotional, and apparel products. We're actually here today at one of our clients, Urban Growler. We do all kinds of different PPE and branded items for many Midway Chamber members and other companies like Ramsey County and St. Paul Saints and XL Energy and many others. So that's in a nutshell what we do. We also engage with some work globally on training sales teams and helping people define the value of their organization. So that's another aspect of our work. And for those of you that don't know, I also happen to represent District 3 for the Metropolitan Council. So we have that sort of government perspective as we try to do things a little bit differently. So is the mayor on, Chad? Okay. So what we'll do is, we have a few questions just as I've talked to some of our business members and that we'll start off with the mayor. And then if people have things that we would, that they want to ask, or if we haven't covered them, if you can just put those in the chat, and then we will get to those questions as well as we can. I would just, I'll take just a quick minute. I think, most of the people on the call know the mayor, but we'll just do a quick background. He's the 46th mayor of St. Paul. He's the first African-American mayor. He's a fourth generation St. Paul resident. I know his mom and has worked with his mom, Commissioner Tony Carter, who's chair of the Ramsey County Board for a long time. He currently lives in Rondo, quite near to his original family home. His first 3 years, I think it's almost in his term, have been filled with a lot of different accomplishments. He passed the $15 an hour minimum wage, increased the number of free rec centers for kids to go. One of the things is I value education. The $50 for every child to believe that they can have a college education and get them started on that path, I think is an important piece. And as we just had on our meeting yesterday at the council, thinking about affordable housing, which is just a really critical need, in particular in St. Paul and Minneapolis, but across our region, and the mayor has been leading in that effort as well. And just one other, I first met the mayor when he was a council member, probably 10, 11 years ago, and he was a great partner for the chamber and a great partner for the businesses along University Avenue as we work to save the 800 businesses that are being impacted by the Green Line construction. And so, Mayor Carter, I value that partnership, and maybe if you'd like to say a few words, that would be a great way to start.
Thank you, Chris. I really appreciate it and really appreciate seeing all of you on this call right now. Our kind of tradition of civic engagement, of working together to work through challenges, I think is the secret sauce into St. Paul's ability to kind of rebuild from these crises that we're in right now. I see all over the place, in the news or different places, people talk about a country in crisis or St. Paul as a city or our state or metro area in crisis. And that's an understatement, right? We are in crises, we're in compound crises, we're in crisis on top of crisis, as 2020 has brought us not only a global health pandemic, but a pandemic economy, as we've seen, the traumatizing videos that we've seen of George Floyd's murder and all the different types of incidents like that we've had to see on camera, phone, video, kind of from around our country, as we see, the civil unrest that came to our community this summer, that further traumatized our same communities that were already kind of struggling in the first place. And saw in one just horrific night of destruction, at last count, 330 businesses either damaged or destroyed, all in one fell swoop, in the most kind of devastating night or destructive night in St. Paul's history. We are a city that is kind of fighting on every front, frankly. And so I appreciate what you said, Chris. We kind of came into office excited about kind of everything the opportunities we have in front of us as a city, and driving, I think, a big vision for the future of our city. And we're kind of in a different mode right now. The mode that we're in right now is figuring out how to survive this crisis, how to move forward, and how to rebuild from it. I don't use the phrase recover, Chris, and the reason is because the phrase recover brings to mind a mental picture, and I'm working with my chief of staff today who's in the office with me. Um, but but recovery brings to mind a mental picture of getting back to where we were 6 months ago, or 6 years ago, or for some of us, sometimes it sounds like 6 decades ago, that we want to get back to. Our goal is to move forward. Our goal is to establish a much more resilient economy. Our goal is to operationalize in our economics. So here's the thing. I play with her all the time. So while I'm sitting here on mute waiting to talk, she's quiet. The moment I start talking, she thinks it's time to play. So sorry about that. But our goal is to establish a more resilient economy that really connects all of us to it. Right now, one of those challenges obviously exists very viscerally for us in the Midway area, which was the epicenter of that civil unrest that we experienced at the beginning of the summer. We have worked, and frankly, I'll tell you, one of the challenges that we had in responding to that, we tried to get kind of state help, but the state wouldn't help us on that. And one of the challenges is we had already, frankly, broken all of our piggy banks with regard to business assistance to stand up the bridge fund that we administered at the kind of beginning of this crisis to just get cash in the hands of struggling small businesses. And so, we had already sort of raided our piggy bank with regard to business assistance funds, and have been working to kind of reestablish that. We will be making some announcements soon about kind of our next rounds of business support. So I'm excited, and we can chat about that. But I want to leave open opportunity for conversation. I hope you're tracking the conversation about our St. Paul City budget, because it's a very critical kind of conversation. I brought forward a budget that is entirely centered around what I call the 3 zeros. Zero property tax increase, because we know that now is not a time to solve our budget challenges for next year. I would have had to raise property taxes by 13%. And I don't know a single business owner or resident of our community who would feel like that was a good idea right now. Zero staff layoffs is the second zero. That's because our residents and our businesses are relying on our frontline staff today more than ever. We've seen our reliance on our police officers and our firefighters who valiantly worked to kind of protect our Midway area in particular from even further damage over this summer. We've seen our reliance on our kind of code folks and DSI folks who have worked to kind of completely redefine on the fly how you get a sidewalk cafe and all those types of things, who I think have done a really good job of that. The feedback that I've heard from business owners and restaurants and coffee shops, et cetera, has been that they have been really incredible. And we've seen our rec leaders delivering food and doing kind of rec check online, our librarians creating curbside pickup programs and boosting our investments in mobile hotspots so our families can access the internet, which is a critical lifeline, especially right now. And so we didn't want to lay off city staff. And then the third one is we didn't want to raid our city's emergency reserves. We have that rainy day fund that, and yes, it's raining right now, but it hasn't stopped raining. So we have a significant amount of unknowns still on the horizon for us, and saying we're going to leave that rainy day fund intact gives us the opportunity to have the sort of flexibility and readiness to respond to whatever next year brings and beyond that. So those are things are critical. In the context of that, we are being aggressive, kind of, I think, in three areas that are critical towards kind of setting our city on the path to the future. One is our response to the number of individuals in our community who are experiencing unsheltered homelessness. We have an unsheltered homeless population today that's about 13 times larger than it was just this time a year ago. And so we're being intentional about how we respond there. Our deputy mayor is leading the charge, leading the way on that, and that's a critical strategy for us. Two, we've launched recently a guaranteed income pilot in our community to show the country and first, to help a set of families. It'll identify a set of 150 families, leveraging CARES dollars and private funding, who will receive a $500 unconditional monthly benefit for a period of 18 months. We'll be doing that work alongside a national research team who will provide independent third-party evaluation of what the impacts are on the family spending, on the children, and et cetera, so that we'll know kind of what the outcomes are. It gives us a chance to help some families who are really vulnerable and need help right now, while contributing to the kind of national understanding and body of research around this type of policy. And the third is to continue to evolve our public safety kind of framework in St. Paul. We know that even the perceptions around public safety in St. Paul impact the business environment, impact the ability of folks to invest and create jobs and create economic activity and increase our tax base in St. Paul. All of our jobs, I think, at the city start with maintaining a safe city. I think of that as sort of the platform or the foundation upon which we build all the rest of our goals. And so getting better, getting smarter, getting more comprehensive, getting more coordinated about how we maintain a safe city that can that can not just respond as quickly as possible after something terrible happens and someone calls 911, but that is making the type of proactive investments necessary to reduce the number of times we find ourselves needing to call 911 in the first place, is a significant body of work that we're continuing to be committed to in St. Paul as well. So I'm happy to take any questions and talk about anything in specific that you want to talk about, but I wanted to give you that kind of broad overview of what our city's budget looks like and how we're trying to approach kind of supports for businesses in our community.
Maybe just let's stay on public safety for a minute. One of the things that it seems from a business community perspective is whether it's the reality or the perception, people feel unsafe coming both really to the two downtowns, but and also to the Midway area. And I think, as we've talked on our executive committee, that the reality is not necessarily that people feel safe, but that's just the perception. What are you able to do, or are there plans to try to both keep the Midway a safe place for people to come and shop and go to work, and then also work on that perception issue that people have around the region of both Minneapolis and St. Paul?
Yeah, thanks for the question. I mean, and first, I think one of the first things that's important to note is what you just described, Chris, is that it's a perception that doesn't necessarily match our reality. As certainly if you compare St. Paul to any of our cohort cities, any of our peer cities around the country, any city with a comparable population as us, then our crime rates beat the national average across the board by a long way. If you compare us to other Minnesota cities, we have a larger population, so the N might be higher, but our crime rates are comparable. Our crime rates are for the level of major American urban city that we maintain in our community. We are a safe city, comparatively speaking, by any measure. I'll also say that national comparisons and national statistics don't help much when you are experiencing an incident of crime, or when you're a victim of a crime or something along those lines. And so, I'm pleased to be in a city both that can beat all the national averages, and a city at the same time that's not satisfied with that, that says we still have to do more. I think first it starts with kind of continuing to kind of support the cleanup on University Avenue. That if the space looks torn down, if the space looks run down, if the space looks uncared for, then it'll feel all of those things. It'll feel insecure as well. So, that's one of the things that we're working pretty heavily with our PED staff, planning and economic development staff, as well as with our Department of Safety and Inspection staff as well, to help facilitate that cleanup so that we can kind of have that avenue look and feel like we want it to facilitate development in the Midway, around Allianz Field, the redevelopment of the Midway Shopping Center, kind of in that whole stretch there, so that we're bringing people. Eyes on the street is absolutely critical for us as well, and so that we are kind of have the opportunity to tell those stories. Frankly, for downtown and the Midway, it's challenging because with some of the economic shutdowns, that reduces some of the kind of that livability, that vibrancy, the eyes and feet on the street that exists as sort of a natural deterrent to crime. And so, our hope is, as we kind of find our way through this pandemic and start to revitalize some of these spaces that have to be vital, when the people are gone, it creates sort of a vacuum that allows sort of unsavory activity to kind of take its place. And so as we're able to kind of repopulate those spaces with employees and with shoppers and with consumers and with pedestrians and things like that, that'll exist too as a natural kind of crime deterrent. The final thing is a storytelling. I mean, I grew up in Central High School, and we always used to say, look, if anytime you see a newspaper article about 2 students who got in a fight, it's also a newspaper article about 2,500 students who didn't. And our Midway area, our downtown, is that same way. There's just incredible innovation happening. There's incredible business activity happening. There's incredible activities and kind of events that occur. And anytime anything negative happens in the Midway, we can guarantee it's headline news. But some of the stuff, the amazing stuff that happens kind of day in and day out, never gets that type of attention. So I want to be the chief storyteller for the areas as well, to help bring the attention to all the great things so that we can counterbalance those negative narratives.
So, when we built the Green Line 10 years ago, one of the areas that we thought about, what could this Midway region look like, or this Midway area look like? And we haven't seen the level of development in the Midway as we have seen in, on the Minneapolis end of the Green Line. And so, one of the questions is just, how do we get the Midway Shopping Center site going as being that anchor like US Bank Stadium was on the Minneapolis side? And then just maybe, while you're talking about that, what is sort of your vision for how economic development and job creation can happen in the Midway over the next 5 to 10 years?
It's a great question and an important question. And I actually think we're going to see what they've seen and more. We have so much development opportunity in St. Paul right now, and particularly on University Avenue, that we sort of have an embarrassment of riches of development opportunity as we think about along the Green Line corridor, as we think about everything from kind of River's Edge downtown to the Sears site, to the Midway Shopping Center, to the area around, to just that whole corridor. There's an amazing opportunity for us to add vibrancy, to add vitality, to add tax base. I mean, we literally have, and that doesn't even include, I'm just talking about University Avenue, that doesn't include the Ford plant, that doesn't include Hillcrest Golf Course or Boys Totem Town site. We have just a ridiculous amount of opportunity to add billions of dollars to our St. Paul tax base. I think it's important, one, that we don't play ourselves short. one of the big kind of issues of the mayor's race that we had 3 years ago was whether or not we should make the most of the opportunities that we had to redevelop on the Ford plant. My perspective was we have a growing population, we have growing needs in our community, and we ought to take every opportunity that we can, especially on the Ford site, especially on all these sites, to maximize the number of housing units that we create, to maximize the number of jobs that we create, but then also to maximize our opportunity as communities to participate in that, right? And so the folks who live in Midway ought to be able to see development that they can go and interview and get a job in the Midway area. The folks who live in the Midway, when we see housing come up, ought to see some spaces where they can afford to live. And so those are the types of goals that we have, is developing our community in ways that support the people who are there, and not in ways that sort of displace the people who are there, the activity that's kind of historically been there. We have an enormous amount of opportunity right now. The challenge is, I think, in front of us is going to be how to harness that opportunity. And somebody will take advantage of it. Somebody's going to rebuild in the Midway. Somebody's going to build around Allianz Field. The challenge for us is figuring out how we leverage the city's resources, we leverage our zoning kind of codes and kind of any special permissions that folks come to the city and ask for, in ways that make sure that the residents, the business owners, the workers who have planted their lives and their fortunes along University Avenue get to participate and thrive in the future that we're building there.
One of the challenges that developers have shared is that it's difficult at times to get through the city process. It's easier to do development in whether it's suburbs or even in Minneapolis from that perspective. How are you trying to make it easier for these developers that are wanting to come in and create jobs or build affordable housing so that they don't get discouraged and look at other places to make those investments?
Chris, that's another place where I think sometimes the perception and the realities kind of intermingle. I was having this conversation with Mayor Fry recently, where I was telling him, people tell me oftentimes that, it's easier to build in Minneapolis than St. Paul. Help me understand why. And he started laughing. He's like, that's funny. Our developers always tell me it's easier to build in St. Paul than it is in Minneapolis. And so I think wherever you go, you'll find that there's kind of requirements and things like that. But the underlying issue that you're talking about, Chris, is one of the core reasons I ran for office in the first place. As we were, negotiating the Ford plant, for example, I told Ryan companies, oh, hey, thank you. I told Ryan companies a lot, at some level, we sort of lack the ability, for a big company like that, we sort of lack the ability to create a process that's too complicated for them to navigate. They have the full-time accountants, they have the full-time compliance folks and the lawyers who can help figure it out. And as we think about kind of the diverse economy that we have in our city, as we think about Little Africa and as we think about Little Mekong, and I see Dr. Bruce Corey on the call, thank you so much for your leadership, both as an academic and as our former PED director, and kind of leading those strategies forward. As we think about District del Sol in St. Paul, as we think about Hmong Village and Hmongtown Market and Selby Avenue, we have small businesses across our community, small ethnic businesses, family-owned businesses in the Midway and across our city who don't have that same level of accountants and compliance staff and lawyers to help them navigate kind of those complex processes. So one of the reasons that I ran for office was to help kind of straighten out some of that. We've done a lot of that work through kind of the virtual design center in DSI. I think is important that we have been building over time. One of the things that we've done with regard to kind of these big projects, Ford plant, Allianz Field, kind of those types of Hillcrest, is established like an executive project lead who her job is to help navigate and figure out how to kind of make the zigzag lines straight and help kind of eliminate the red tape and help try to find the most linear paths to getting those developments done. One of the reasons, probably the biggest reason I'm excited about this, and I've told her that, and her name is Melanie McMahon. You guys might know her as Chris Tolbert's former legislative aide. And one of the biggest things I'm excited about is our ability to take those big projects and use them as sort of the test cases. And what she knows from me is like one of the most important parts of her job is to bring back the learning. What are the things that we keep stumbling on? What are the things that keep being a roadblock? What are the things that, what are the lines that we can make kind of straight for everybody, not just those kind of individual folks, so that we can continue to do it in a way that is not just kind of us inside City Hall kind of determining what we think is best for developers or folks who want to develop in our community, but is keeping our ear to the ground and working directly with folks who want to do business or frankly who want to remodel their home, and saying, how do we work to make this kind of the best thing? I know, and I've learned from many of you, that if we can reduce the development time, if we can reduce the development costs, that's probably one of our easiest ways to stimulate economic development in our community. I'll tell you, one of the things that I'm working with Ricardo Cervantes, our director of DSI, on right now is the question of virtual inspections, right? When you're improving your bathrooms, or you're kind of making your store, more accessible or whatever it is, are there opportunities for us to do an inspection via a smartphone, as opposed to having you wait 3 days for this inspector to get there, that inspector to get there? So, we sort of got all ideas on the table where that's concerned, and happy to hear any additional ones that we're not already thinking of.
Maybe we'll just shift a little bit on to the one crisis, the pandemic, and just impacts on businesses. We've heard from a lot of our members, obviously restaurants and others that are struggling, but a lot of people that aren't in the restaurant business that are, going to an office or used to go to an office every day that are struggling. We just heard yesterday that most people are now paying on their SBA loans. So that 6 month of forgiveness on the SBA loans ended in September or early October for most people. So businesses are really back to their normal expenses. PPP loans have been used up. And I think we hear from a lot of businesses is they're really nervous about the winter, the next few months. I don't think most of us think the pandemic will be over in the next 30, 60 days. So there are some things that the city can do. For example, there's some temporary permits and other things the city's extended, but a lot of those expire. Are there ways of thinking of giving businesses some level of planning and certainty so that some of these things that are done on a 30-day or 40-day basis could be extended for a longer period of time, so that businesses can plan how they would run their restaurant or how they would run their particular operation for a longer period of time, and know how many people they can keep employed and how they would do that? You're on mute.
Yep. I keep joking that the phrases of the year, when it's all said and done, I think Time Magazine is going to say, unprecedented and you're on mute are the phrases of the year. Based on my social media feed, I may have to add Peloton to that, because it seems like there's a bunch of folks getting Pelotons as well. I digress. Our first instinct on this was to figure out how to help businesses. We, at the beginning of the year, one of the first things that we did was establish that St. Paul Bridge Fund, which created that $7,500 kind of benefit, unconditional benefits to small businesses in our community. It was an important investment, an important intervention, and it was not nearly enough. It was what we had, but it was not nearly enough to cover that need. We literally just added, I think, $3.7 million back to our PED department to continue kind of pushing forward that type of work. That work that I don't even know if it's announced yet, but it's going to be focused on expanding the amount of funding for Cultural Star, which has pivoted to like the needs of the arts and cultural community, providing more bridge fund small business applicants with those $7,500 grants. I think we funded 380 or something like that businesses the first time around. So our goal is going to be to kind of re-up the next set of businesses who, we took in the applications and then sort of randomly assigned a number and awarded to the first 380 or so. And so we'll be issuing grants to kind of that next set of businesses. Sorry, it was 330, not 380, come to think of it. So we're going to be continuing kind of that that work as we can. You're right along the lines of kind of the work that we've done to kind of create the temporary, exemptions for conditional use permits and other types of requirements. Just to allowing folks, restaurants to establish those kind of sidewalk cafes. My direction to our kind of licensing staff during that time this spring was create a processes through which businesses can through which businesses can sort of self-certify. If somebody has a food license and a commercial food license, they know how to keep folks safe. Let's allow them to sort of self-certify to avow with us that they've done X, Y, and Z, and to keep on moving and to go ahead and establish it. And know that we'll be around to help sometime soon. We'll be around to help make sure that all the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted. But our goal is to be a facilitator of business activity and not a hinderer of business activity. I hear your question loud and clear about kind of being able to plan. It's a challenge for me because I don't know how long these kind of restrictions will occur. We have no idea what the pandemic or the economy are going to do over the next couple of months, and we're kind of in play it by ear mode on a lot of this stuff. It's my expectation and intention not to pull the rug out from under anybody while this kind of emergency kind of continues to play out. And so each time we renew, I renew for the longest amount of time that I can through executive order. But I'll tell you this, frankly, a lot of the stuff that we're doing in response to the COVID crisis are things that I think we're learning we can do and probably should do permanently otherwise. So that's one of the things that we're going to be exploring, as well as what of the things that we've done in response in terms of the permissions or the kind of exemptions that we've created, which ones of those kind of are things that can just help facilitate our economy long term anyways. And so, we're going to be looking at those types of things. I'd love to have a follow-up conversation with you, Chris, or anybody who's interested in how we think about, if there's kind of specific recommendations for how we think about giving you the opportunity to plan. Candidly, I feel like we don't have the opportunity to plan right now either, because so much of this is sort of playing the ball as it lies. But I do understand the importance of planning and being able to kind of get ahead of kind of what's going to happen the next quarter and in the next year. So maybe there's an opportunity for us to work. My executive order, the things that I do through executive order can only last for so long, and then we have to re-update it. But maybe there's an opportunity for us to work with the city council to establish some of these things by temporary ordinances or things like that.
That'd be great. And I think there are probably a number of things that would really help the businesses, and we can work to pull that together and just give you some ideas that might be, again, temporary, but things that would help people be able to plan through the winter months. Mm-hmm. One of the, there's a good question in the chat, and we've heard this at the council about 2040 plans, and with all the changes of more people working from home, and really pretty significant differences in traffic patterns and how people operate. Are there any thoughts to changing your comprehensive plan or how you approach the implementation of that comprehensive plan with these significant changes in work-life balance or how people are operating?
Yes and no. I think our world is changing, and I think we've started to get rid of the lexicon of thinking about getting back to normal. Because I think there are many of us who are realizing that back to normal, if normal is where we were in January, is probably never going to happen. And in many ways, that getting back to normal probably shouldn't happen, because normal is what had us in such a non-resilient economy, that had us so vulnerable to the impacts of this pandemic in a way that it's all but shut down our economy. And so I think there will be impacts on how we think about the city that we're building in the long term. And I think there will be, it will be appropriate, likely, to incorporate some of those impacts into the way we think about our comprehensive plan. I'll tell you, we're frankly have been in crisis management mode. We've been in budget kind of amendment mode or budget adoption mode. I look forward to the day where we're back in strategic planning or comprehensive plan redraft mode. But so on a high level, yes. On a specific level, we don't have any kind of specific amendments to the comprehensive plan in response to the kind of COVID crisis going on kind of right now, just because our staff is frankly all hands on deck helping to respond to the crisis.
One of the things that we, you're a parent, I'm a parent, we have kids at home that are learning.
Yes.
As I've
learning.
Right. As I've talked
playing Roblox
with other people that may not have the same access to technology, the same access to Wi-Fi, et cetera, as I have, as you have, what can the city do to, one is to, look at providing more hotspots, more access. But the other thing that came up in one of our conversations was just helping the parents. If you have a parent, let's say that hasn't graduated from high school and they're now trying to teach their child, they may or may not understand all of the things that they're being asked to teach and keeping their child on track. And so just helping those families who really not expand our racial disparities or disparities in our city, but sort of close those up. And I know education is not directly under what you do, but just thoughts or what you guys are trying to do with those kids.
Well, Chris, I'd say education is the key to, literally every ambition we have as a city. If you kind of go further and further upstream, for every single one of them, you'll eventually find yourself back to education. This is a space that I've spent a lot of time in since I was on the city council, found in the St. Paul Promise neighborhood, to when I was working for the governor as executive director of the Minnesota Children's Cabinet. So I think it's really important. We're working closely with our schools. Obviously, our school district has been shifted to this kind of virtual learning environment. That's created challenges for them. They've lost students, which of course means they lose revenue to help produce kind of the top quality learning environments, which of course means they lose more students. So they end up kind of getting stuck in a paradox that's a vicious cycle that's challenging for them. One of our most in-demand products in our St. Paul library is virtual hotspots. We have virtual hotspots in the library that families can check out. And so we bought a significant number of new virtual hotspots right at the beginning of this crisis to boost our ability to do that. But yet and still, like I said, it's our busiest, it's our most in-demand thing in our libraries. And so I don't even know how long the waiting list is right now to get your hands on one of them. That's another resource that we just need far, far more of. We're using COVID funding for some of this. We're partnering with the school district and the county to help ensure that students, frankly, and teachers have access to the hotspots that they need to participate in the or have access to the connectivity that they need to learn, to get a job, to those types of things. But to your point, this has changed the way not just businesses operate, but families operate. We have a rule in our house. I'm on a live meeting right now, so I can be on Wi-Fi, but any of my other devices that are not on a live meeting, because we've got students in classes and my wife has meetings and things like that, have to get your devices off of the Wi-Fi so it doesn't kind of clam up, or games and things like that off of Wi-Fi so it doesn't kind of clog up the Wi-Fi. And so having to think through stuff like this is new for our family. We're doing it on the fly. We've got our kind of whiteboards that say, here's our calendar and here's who's on Wi-Fi when and who's doing in live classes when. And one of the things that I'm working with the district right now on is, for those of you who have had young children, we have a 7-month-old, as everyone on this call knows, because you can hear, but we're an ECFE family. We have early childhood family education that is a phenomenal support for families who have young children, parent education, where parents can get on the line together and just say, hey, here's what are you thinking and feeling? What's it like to have a 7-year-old? Is this normal? Is that normal? And one of the suggestions that I actually made recently to our superintendent was, I think we need something like that for right now, high school parents and junior high parents and elementary school parents, because we're all trying to figure out a new normal. We're all trying to figure out our systems and our ways to support our children learning. We're all kind of struggling with exactly what you just described. And instead of 100,000 families doing that separately. We should create every opportunity that we can to do it together, to learn from one another, and to be supportive of one another. I'm tutoring my daughter in Algebra 2, as well as one of her classmates in that, right, via Zoom, who knows that, like, I'm tracking this class, and I'll admit, I Algebra 1 is easy for me to remember. Sometimes in the Algebra 2 book, I have to check the index before I help. I'm spending a lot of time saying, I don't know. What did your teacher say about that? I'm not just going to give you the answer. So I imagine I'll continue. I'll be saying that more and more as the years progress. But thinking about how we navigate this as a community, both emotionally, I think is just as important as thinking about how we establish the hotspots. And the final piece that I didn't say is, thinking about how we boost the hotspots that we have in libraries and rec centers and parks in our city as well, so families can access the internet there as well.
There's been just a couple of comments about whether or not we could be thinking about, or the city could be thinking about, whether it's PSAs or other ways of promoting, the Midway or other business areas that, again, about, combating the perception around safety, letting people know that they're open, letting people know, when we were doing the Green Line, we said we have, our tagline was around the world in 18 miles, just letting people know of the vibrance that is St. Paul, and encouraging people to come. Is there any thought around marketing the city in that way, and bringing people back, as we move our way out of the pandemic?
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I, of course, was pretty heavily involved in that around the world kind of marketing campaign, which I think was important to let folks know that kind of our businesses were still kind of in business. And the other thing, I'd love to see us, frankly, kind of build. I have a theory. I always joke with some of my friends who, post these great pictures of their vacations on Instagram. I always joke with them, you just spent, $5,000 on an experience you could have had on the West Side for, for $35. And so, thinking about how we create kind of a St. Paul business passport, right? I think is something that's important. And then the other piece that has been interest of mine for a long time is thinking about how we get more intentional about our economic kind of infrastructure, about our economic ecosystem, in that, whatever you're buying, there's a St. Paul business that's selling, and whatever you're selling, there's a St. Paul business that's buying. And if we get more intentional about thinking about how we source and sell to one another, source from and sell to one another, that can only have positive impacts kind of on all of our businesses and on the kind of economic situation that we face in the city. So those are the type of things that I'd love to be able to do. Those are the type of things that, can't just be done out of City Hall. It'd have to be in partnership with the Midway Chamber. It has to be in partnership with local business leaders. And again, not just the Midway Chamber, but the East Side Area Business Association and the St. Paul Chamber, et cetera. So those are absolutely the type of things that I'd be open to partnering with our business leaders on doing, and would see that to be successful as an area in which I am supporting your leadership, and not an area in which, I'm asking you to come and follow me.
One comment on the inner city leadership session when you spoke, I think you used the term "build back better." But one of the things is we're coming out of sort of these twin crises, and you've been a champion for reducing racial disparities your whole career. But these crises have really increased those disparities. Right? We see unemployment rates for people of color spiking. We see many businesses owned by people of color were not able to get access to PPP loans. How, as we build back better, as we don't go back to the old normal, but we really think about what the city can look like going forward and how that can be better for the business owners, the residents, the job seekers. How do we think about that in a different way? How do we use this as an opportunity to break some of the systemic problems that exist as we're building back better?
It's a great. I think it's critical, because as we think about, I heard our Senator Harris say in a speech recently that no matter what we say, that someone could look at, and I'm paraphrasing, could look at the impacts of this pandemic, and the pandemic is showing what America thinks about its communities of color. That's a haunting thing to say, and that's a haunting thing to feel. But we know that our Black and brown communities have been impacted disproportionately by both the physical health and economic health impacts of this pandemic. We know, I think now, more acutely than ever before, in America, that as long as any one of us can't afford a home to shelter in place, as long as any one of us can't afford to take a week off of work to care for a sick child, or go to the doctor when we have symptoms, or frankly, as long as any one of us has concerns about our ability to trust the police officers who are here to protect and serve our communities, then every one of us is worse off. Every one of us is less secure because of it. I think that's knowledge that we're going to have to operationalize, and we're going to have to kind of really do something with. So again, our goal, and I don't know, I may have used the phrase "build back better." What I've told, and I think I said it on the beginning of this call, is we're not focused on recovery, right? The word recovery says to me that, you know, it invokes an image of trying to get back to where we were 6 months ago, or back to where we were. Sometimes it sounds like 6 decades ago when some of our kind of elected leaders speak out of Washington, D.C. And so our goal isn't to recover back to where we were. Our goal is to move forward. Our goal is to identify a route to a more equitable, a more inclusive economy that engages and lifts the people in our communities. It absolutely evokes the question we just had, the conversation we were just having about doing development and in ways that benefit our community and not displace community members, not displace the local businesses or the local employees or the local residents who have been here, who have built University Avenue to what it is, for example, but in ways that lift those folks in those communities. That's going to be important to us. That guaranteed income trial that I talked about is in that spirit of building this kind of inclusive economy. But I'll tell you, when we look at an economy that has more than has multiplied by a factor of 10 our number of homeless individuals in our community, that has created over 81,000 applications for unemployment in St. Paul since March 15th, in a city of 315,000 people. 81,000 unemployment applications is staggering. As we look at an economy that does that while increasing billionaire wealth, while producing record-breaking stock market returns, that engenders a resentment towards big businesses, that creates a resentment towards the whole economic setup that I think is poor for our whole economic ecosystem that doesn't serve any of us well. So dismantling that is going to be critical to us. This is in the spirit of why it's important for us to put $50 in the college savings accounts, why it's important for us to raise the minimum wage, why it's important for us to have earned sick and safe time, why it's important for all of those things. And I'll tell you, one of the things, as you talked about our ICLV visit, we had an ICLV visit to Baltimore a few years ago. And when we were in Baltimore, we were in a community that was still rebuilding from the rioting that happened there after Freddie Gray was killed in police custody. And they kept telling us, after Freddie Gray was killed, after the city burned, we changed the way we hire in this way. We changed the way we do college admissions in that way. We changed the way we do city funding in this way. We talked to university presidents, to the mayor, we talked to business leaders, we talked to cultural organizations, and literally every single one of them said, look, after that happened, we realized we had to change X, Y, and Z. And a rhetorical conversation we had then was, we know that we have, deep disparities in the Twin Cities metro area. What would it look like for us to make those types of transformations before we experience rioting, before we experience deep civil unrest? That's no longer a rhetorical conversation. That is real. That has come to our front doorstep. And we're in a space now where we have seen the rage around our unequitable economy. We've seen the rage around killings of unarmed Black men, and not just about the killings of unarmed Black men, but that as an extension of this kind of frustration and exacerbation with institutional systemic inequities in our community. And it is ours to change that direction right now. That's why we have to change our approach to our economy. That's why we have to support our individuals who have experienced unsheltered homelessness. That's why we have to transform our approach to public safety. That's why we have to do all the things that we're doing right now.
Mr. Ferguson, may I ask a question?
Sure.
Thank you. My name is Maria Mitchell. Hello, Mayor Carter. I am a transplant from Los Angeles, South Central California, and I've came up here to go to college, been here for 48 years. I want to add to the question I presented in chat, so I thank you for your response to that. The reason why I wanted to join on this Zoom meeting was because it was about your vision for the Midway. So I thank you for sharing that. Without a vision, the people perish. But in order for the vision to take place, for the visionary to have accomplished what his vision is, he's got to have a buy-in from the community. What can you do, building on my question about a PSA that could be done for a dime with today's technology and a Mac, whoever has one in-house, what can we do to let the general community know your vision? Because I think right now we need some hope. We need some encouragement as a community, as a state, country, world, whatever, but we're starting out where we live first, right? As a city, you were voted in because many people, including myself, have such great hope and have not been unhappy. So thank you very much. But just to encourage you to move forward, communication to me is key. And when you let people know what's going on, now you don't have to give us the whole ABC and all the, mechanics of it, but just to have something like a person on the street, interview in the Midway area and the surrounding territories of St. Paul, the good things that people are doing. I know Midway Chamber of Commerce is doing so many good things to help out so many people with foodstuffs and all that kind of stuff. I think right about now, and maybe overdue, we need some kind of PSA that could be interjected wherever, either if it's online or if it's too expensive for television, somewhere to let people know that as a city of St. Paul, we are doing something to counteract all this negativity, because that is the only thing that's going to get people to buy into the visions and help them to really listen and say, you know what, that Mayor Carter's got something going on for himself. I think I'm going to listen harder and get on board. Thank you.
Maria, I appreciate it. One great move to St. Paul from LA, great move, and that speaks to your character. So congratulations on that. Two, I'm glad that you lifted that up. I was having a conversation and wasn't watching the chat, so I didn't see I must have missed the kind of conversation that's specific to a PSA, but I love that. I'll tell you this, two things is, one, I always tell folks the biggest idea of my administration is that not only the mayor gets to have big ideas, and that's great because I learn from people constantly, and then right now especially I get asked every day kind of what my sources are of inspiration, and kind of the biggest thing I say is like the people who I represent. I mean, the fact that, and I talk all the time about the fact that like this past spring, when kind of the governor's executive order closed restaurants, I heard from a restaurateur here in St. Paul, and I saw his number come up on my phone, and I went, oh man, he's gonna be mad. And he was calling to ask me, since we're closing, how can I make sure that some low-income families get to eat this great food that we have so it doesn't go bad? For that to be his instinct in that moment was just amazing. The morning after that civil unrest that we experienced, everybody saw the civil unrest. Everybody saw those fires. Very few saw what we saw the next morning, and that's just people coming out of nowhere with shovels and brooms and rags and sponges to just help each other, right? And I first assumed like this must be somebody's aunt or uncle or something helping, but people just came to find someone to help. And that was one of the most beautiful things that I've ever seen or experienced, all the way to like standing outside of a business that was a complete loss. The next day, I was standing outside of a business with the business owner and said, Mayor, I've lost everything. There's nothing I can do. And I told her, yes, I know, and I'm sorry, and we'll be here with you as you rebuild. She cut me off to say, no, I'm sorry. I was just saying I can help other people. I have time to help other people if they need help. Like those types of stories, like I, honest to God, like get choked up as I talk about these stories of the way, because this crisis has impacted us in ways that are unprecedented. And our human response in St. Paul has just been amazing and unprecedented. I mean, the way the church leaders who are showing up at our tent encampments to help make sure people have food. I mean, there's just no shortage of stories, to your point, Maria, about the ways in which people are chipping in to help one another. And I see that probably because I'm moving in all these spaces in a way that other folks may not necessarily. So all that to say is if I have an opportunity to kind of inspire and try to help give people hope, it's not because of what I'm doing, it's because of what our residents and business owners are doing literally every day in our community. And I think you're right. I think that's absolutely worth highlighting. I think a PSA or something along those lines is really important. I'll tell you that producing it probably wouldn't cost that much or be that difficult to do. Getting it out could. And so, so tell you what, if you guys commit to retweeting and reposting it and helping make sure people get their eyes on it, I'll see what we can figure out how to do in terms of getting something like that produced.
If you need a referral, just let me know.
All right.
I'll connect you.
I like it. I like
Okay.
it. I appreciate that.
Okay.
I appreciate the suggestion. That's a great suggestion.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mayor Carter. Our time is at the end. Do you have any final sort of
Chris,
thoughts for our group?
I think I saw some questions about kind of more specifics about what I mean with regard to kind of the proactive investments that we need to make in our community regarding public safety. Can I take just a couple of minutes to kind of flesh that out more? I mean Selby Avenue, right? Selby Avenue is, I think, the perfect example. This past weekend, I got to walk Dr. Jill Biden up Selby Avenue, and I showed her Golden Time Coffee Shop. I showed her Bouquets by Carolyn, a local kind of business. I pointed at Two Scoops ice cream shop across the street, but the Secret Service agents weren't in the mood for ice cream apparently, so we couldn't go across the street. All that to say, when I was a kid, Selby Avenue wasn't the place where that tour would have happened, right? When I was a kid, Selby Avenue was a space that was best known for gang violence, was best known for kind of, criminal activity, where I had a cousin killed over nonsense on that avenue when I was a kid. And that space is transformed fundamentally. It's transformed because of a combination of things. It's transformed because of a phenomenal group of like youth-serving nonprofits that have that made Selby Avenue their business. It transformed because of businesses like Golden Time Coffee Shop, who invested there where nobody else was kind of investing, and created jobs, but also a gathering space there. It transformed because the Jazz Fest brings people to that space, kind of constantly keeps the eyes on this space. It transformed because the city made the investments of putting above standard lighting and above standard sidewalk and a decorative median right there. And it transformed, frankly, not just because we put a whole bunch of police officers there. It didn't transform until we put a whole lot of kind of proactive investment and a whole mix of proactive investments in there that I believe worked together in combination to kind of do that. So our public safety framework moving forward, and this is what we're kind of evolving right now, our community first safety framework into, is really kind of a tale in four parts. The first is emergency responders who have the equipment, who have the training, who have the resource, who have the community trust they need to do their job well, and frankly, who have the ability to focus their energy, their time, energy, and resources on violent crime and proactive community outreach. When we look into our 911 call data, we see that 2/3 of our 911 calls, incoming 911 calls in St. Paul, are for, we prioritize them, priority 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Priority 4 and 5 are categorized as routine. Priority 3 is categorized as urgent, and 1 and 2 are categorized as emergencies. 2/3, 66% of our calls are priority 4 and 5 calls, right? Which are nonviolent. There's no suspect present. There's no imminent threat of personal harm. Many of them are non-criminal, but those are 2/3 of the 911 calls that we receive. So when we hear police officers say we're running from call to call to call, when we hear police officers say we're called upon to be social workers and housing counselors and mental health therapists and all these types of things we don't have the capacity or resources to be, that's because we're literally sending them 2/3 of their job is responding kind of to these things that, again, are non-criminal oftentimes, that are non-violent, that there's no threat, et cetera. And so our goal is to allow our police officers to focus on the kind of violent crime, responding to and preventing violent crime, and playing basketball with kids, right? And doing the type of proactive community engagement, visiting a St. Paul business, those types of things. In order to do that, that second phase is what I think of as alternative 911 responders. When there's a homeless person asleep on a bench, when there's a car parked in the wrong place, when there's a dog that's barking or even that bit someone, there's probably other sets of responders that can be more appropriate, that can meet the need more directly, and frankly can show up quicker than a police officer can. And so it's the first responders, it's the alternative kind of responses, it's the type of the third phase is the type of community-driven or evidence-based, data-driven kind of crime reduction, crime prevention efforts that we've started funding last year through our Community First Public Safety Supplemental Budget. And then the fourth piece is what I think of as environmental transformation along the lines of what I just described on Selby Avenue. So that's how we think of making those proactive investments that can help us reduce the number of times that we find ourselves having to call 911 in the first place. I think that's a really promising strategy, but one of the things I tell folks is it's a promising strategy that won't be perfect when we kind of put the boots on the ground, that we'll have to continue to learn and develop and evaluate over time, because frankly, it's something that St. Paul, and we're working closely with San Francisco because they're the other city that's kind of walking this road along with us. But there's not really a playbook in front of us for. What we know is that what we've tried, a public safety framework that's just centered simply on police, prosecutors, and prisons, hasn't gotten us the outcomes that we want, either for our neighborhoods, for equity, for businesses, for public safety outcomes in our community. We know that we have to try something new. We know that the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. And we're going to think more broadly. There was a Midway business owner who recently told me that he spends, I forget how much money a year on private security for his store. And asked him why. And he said, well, because, we have, individuals who experience homelessness who come in and they, use our bathrooms and they wash their face and brush their teeth in our bathrooms, and they kind of sit in our space for kind of warm shelter in the wintertime. We have young people who come after school. This is obviously a conversation before COVID. We have young people who come in after school who have nowhere else to go, and those types of things. That's a perfect kind of analogy for me, because that's a perfect space that says we can do more than just hire more police officers in the context of keeping our city safe. What that business owner was telling me is he would feel safer if we had better after school programs that engage those young people, if we had like places for those individuals who have experienced homelessness to go and brush their teeth and wash their face and kind of live with dignity. So all of those things have to be a part of our public safety framework if we really expect to produce fundamental outcomes for our city.
Yes, sir, if we have time for just one more follow-up around the Midway shopping center. So, one of the successes, obviously, Selby, is there's a lot more people there now. And, you put businesses in, you create activity, and that creates an environment that is successful. And, I think as from a Midway Chamber perspective, we're concerned about the University of Snelling area and wanting to see that site get developed. It seems like, development is a little bit stalled. So I guess really two questions. One is, what can you, or what are you doing to try to get that development going? And then how can we help you in that process to get University in Snelling going and having that be the catalyst for development along that corridor?
Yeah, I think it's an important question. The good thing is we have a strong master plan in place for Snelling Midway redevelopment that we remain kind of committed to. And that's a pedestrian-first neighborhood, repairing the street grid, establishing mixed-use development, public open spaces, and this kind of sustainable stormwater management. It's a big vision. And I think that kind of successfully executing the redevelopment of that space in a way that meets those values can really emphasize what we value as a community. We've seen that space. Frankly, I always tell folks, like, looking at, Midway Shopping Center, these kind of spaces along University Avenue that have kind of adopted this old kind of 70s suburban style of development, this kind of one-story building in the middle of this kind of sea of parking that's usually mostly empty, is a really horrific way to leverage our city's kind of potential tax base. So we need a significantly larger vision there. The great thing is we have, in particular with Snelling Midway, we have owners and developers who have the ability to fund some large thinking, as is reflected in Allianz Field. We have the ability to execute kind of a big vision there. I will tell you, I think of that as a generational opportunity. And so one of the reasons I think it's important for us to be diligent, and that doesn't mean necessarily go slow, but it means not to be in a haste makes waste type of mode where that's concerned, is because we are building something for the next 40 years. And we're building something that is going to have to kind of support our tax base in that area and maximize our tax base for a really long time. We're committed to equitable development there. And like I said, to me, equitable development means being responsible stewards of our economy, creating jobs, again, for people who live in that community, ensuring there's opportunities for local businesses to participate in the economy that we're going to build there, and ensuring that as we build housing, that we're including affordable housing and creating mixed income neighborhoods where every child who grows up in St. Paul can look around their neighborhood and see a painter, a teacher, a doctor who they can aspire to be like. And so that's our goal. And that's the way we're kind of moving forward. We're in the process right now of kind of negotiating back and forth with the owners there, with the developers there, and figuring out how we create development agreements, how we do the, if there's going to be a TIF agreement, those types of things. We have the ability to kind of use TIF on that site, and so there will be a significant set of negotiations that have to take place to be able to kind of deliver on a big vision like that. I'll tell you, for the Ford plant, those negotiations happened over the course of about 1.5 years and landed on one of the biggest kind of development agreements, or the biggest development agreement that the city has ever entered into, that I think both delivers an exciting project and honors our duty to create a good deal for taxpayers, frankly. And so those are the goals that are going to drive not only Snelling Midway, but all of these kind of big sites that we are in the process of working through right now.
Well, thank you so much for your time, Carter. And I think I speak on behalf of all the Midway businesses. Everybody is looking forward to growing their business and getting back, maybe not back to normal, but back to business growth, back to prosperity, back to seeing lively streets in our community, and all of that, the excitement that brings. And we appreciate your support of the business community and in that vision of getting to a place where we can all be prosperous and all be successful here in St. Paul. So thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate all your time.
Thank you so much, Mayor. You speak with a lot of passion and compassion for St. Paul, and I hope that people that are listening to you today are inspired and are going to be thinking the same ways and same passion for our community. So thank you so much, and I hope I can see others next week at our next event with Ron Wirtz from the Federal Reserve on October 15th. Thank you, everybody.